bombing Gaza. They bombed Gaza the last 10 nights. No one is reporting this. I know the people in Gaza. I was there for 2 years. They're calling me all the time. They're scared. Many of them have already lost so many.
The women's WNBA also canceled 3 games Wednesday after members of the Washington Mystics arrived wearing T-shirts, each with 7 holes, symbolizing the 7 bullet holes in the back of.
Hello, my name is Stanley Heller. Welcome to The Struggle. Corporate media hasn't mentioned it, but Gaza has been bombed repeatedly for over 10 days. There was a protest in Britain.
We're here because we are demanding that Israel stops bombing Gaza. They bombed Gaza the last 10 nights. No one is reporting this. I know the people in Gaza. I was there for 2 years. They're calling me all the time. They're scared. Many of them have already lost so many to the bombings of Gaza, like the 2,200 that were killed, 500 children in 51 days. 6 years ago, Israel killed 500 Gaza kids in 50 days. This is what we're talking about. More are getting bombed right now, and this is a crime against humanity right under our noses. We're going to keep taking action. When we pushed against HSBC, they had to divest from Elbit, Israel's largest arms manufacturer. There are 4 Elbit factories in England and 10 offices. Everybody should be taking action. They are facilitating mass murder, and I saw that trauma up close. I saw in those hospitals as those kids were coming in, and I saw those parents as they had lost more and more, and the arms trade is developing and furnishing off the deaths of those people, off the burnt bodies that I saw in those hospitals. It's time to take action. It's time to push against this toxic trade in weapons, building these weapons better the more they kill. It's everybody out now. Stop Elbit, stop arming Israel, and anybody else complicit in Israel's war crimes against the Palestinians that are ongoing as we speak right now, with nobody doing a damn thing about it.
Free Palestine! Free Palestine! Free Palestine! Free Palestine! Free Palestine!
They are made in England. We have to get Elbit out of England. We have to stop being complicit in bombing Gaza.
Absolutely.
Stop bombing Gaza.
Stop killing Palestinians. Stop killing Palestinians.
Free Palestine! 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 Free Palestine!
It is no coincidence that these attacks are going on when there has been weeks and weeks of protests by Israeli Jews against the Netanyahu government. Israeli-American Smadar Levi maintains that when Israeli Jews start social protests, the government provokes war. Middle East Eye reports that Salman, the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, the effective dictator of that country, has called off a trip to Washington where he was going to have a face-to-face meeting with Netanyahu to bless normalization with the Israeli apartheid state. MEE says he called it off because news of it became public and he feared there would be sizable protests in Washington. Then that Netanyahu would shake hands with someone the U.S. Senate declared as being personally responsible for the premeditated murder of Jamal Khashoggi is not surprising at all. Now from Democracy Now!, the latest about the outrage in Kenosha, Wisconsin.
In Wisconsin, the U.S. Justice Department said Wednesday it will launch an independent investigation into the police shooting of Jacob Blake, whose shooter was identified Wednesday for the first time as Kenosha police officer Rustin Sheskey. Sheskey, who is white, shot Jacob Blake, an unarmed black father, in the back 7 times as he was getting into his car on Sunday, leaving him paralyzed from the waist down. Sheskey has been placed on paid administrative leave and has not been charged with a crime. The shooting has sparked massive protests across the country. Overnight, protesters in Kenosha defied a 9 p.m. curfew and marched for a 4th straight night, while in Minnesota, Governor Tim Walz called out the National Guard to Minneapolis as protesters took to the streets, breaking windows and removing merchandise from downtown stores. Meanwhile, police have arrested the white teenager who opened fire on Black Lives Matter protesters in Kenosha Tuesday, killing 2 people and injuring a third. 17-year-old Kyle Rittenhouse, a self-declared militia member and avid Trump supporter who was spotted front row at one of the president's rallies in January, was apprehended in Antioch, Illinois Wednesday and charged with murder. On social media, Kyle Rittenhouse posted frequently in support of the pro-police Blue Lives Matter movement, posed with guns, and appeared in a photo when he was just 15 years old wearing a police uniform as part of a public safety cadet program. Eyewitness videos of Rittenhouse's rampage show a shooter with a long gun falling to the ground and shooting into a crowd as protesters attempt to disarm him. Later videos show police then allowed Rittenhouse to leave the scene even as people attempted to identify him as the shooter. At a news conference Wednesday, Kenosha Police Chief Dan Miskinis blamed protesters for the deadly assault. This all comes as damning video from earlier in the night show Kenosha police offering armed vigilantes water.
We got to save a couple, but we'll give you a couple. We appreciate you guys, we really do.
After headlines, we'll go to Wisconsin for the latest. Meanwhile, professional basketball, baseball, and soccer games came to an unprecedented halt Wednesday after Milwaukee Bucks players refused to take the court for a playoff game against the Orlando Magic to protest the police shooting of Jacob Black. The NBA then canceled all 3 of Wednesday's playoff games. On TNT, former basketball star and commentator Kenny Smith walked off the set of Inside the NBA in solidarity with protesters.
As a black man, as a former player, I think it's best for me to support the players and just not be here tonight.
Democracy Now! News highlights Amy Goodman talked about these 2 stories relating to the coronavirus.
In South Korea, the health minister ordered doctors to return to work or face prison sentences as they began a 3-day nationwide strike to protest a medical workforce reform plan. South Korea recorded 441 new coronavirus cases Wednesday, its highest total since March, raising the prospect of new lockdowns. In Nicaragua, at least 46 educators have died of COVID-19 after the government refused to close schools to slow community spread. President Daniel Ortega has celebrated his administration's decision to keep schools open throughout the pandemic, while the teachers' union is demanding a halt to in-person classes.
Here's a COVID story that the media, incredibly, isn't talking about. As of August 26th, cases of COVID in the U.S. are down 21%. In Florida, down 49%. But 2 states are bucking the trend in a big way. In North Dakota, the cases are up by 64%. And in South Dakota, they're up 99%. Whatever could have caused this? Well, there was the Sturgis motorcycle rally in Sturgis, South Dakota, just a couple of weeks ago. Apparently, a virus is not impressed by horsepower or big talk. And now from Democracy Now!, an underreported story about money, jobs, and health insurance.
In economic news, just 2 states have begun distributing a $300 per week federal supplement to weekly unemployment benefits, even though Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin promised on August 10th that most states would have the program up and running within 2 weeks. President Trump set up the makeshift $44 billion program by executive order after Republican lawmakers allowed enhanced unemployment benefits to expire a month ago. Meanwhile, a federal moratorium on evictions expired Monday ahead of September 1st, when rent and mortgage payments come due for 30 million Americans left unemployed during the pandemic. Princeton University's eviction lab estimates up to 40 million people are now at risk of eviction in the coming months. Meanwhile, a new national survey finds 1 in 5 small business owners expect to close if economic conditions don't improve in the next 6 months. And a study by the Economic Policy Institute finds some 12 million Americans have lost their employer-based health insurance since the start of the pandemic.
12 million people have lost their company-paid-for health insurance, and neither party supports Medicare for all. How about your own city council? Is it speaking out on the subject?
And in New Zealand, a court has sentenced a self-professed white nationalist gunman to life in prison without the possibility of parole after convicting him on 51 counts of murder, 40 counts of attempted murder, and engaging in a terrorist act. In March of last year, 29-year-old Australian Brenton Tarrant emailed out a racist manifesto minutes before he opened fire with an assault rifle at 2 mosques in the city of Christchurch, live streaming his massacre on Facebook. Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern welcomed the sentencing.
The trauma of March 15 is not easily healed. But today, I hope, is the last where we have any cause to hear or utter the name of the terrorist behind it. His deserves to be a lifetime of complete and utter silence.
Burying one dead friend is heartbreaking. How about burying a one of a kind? A one of a kind that is my son, Atta, and 49 beloved brothers and sisters in one go. The day started beautifully. There is no match for Atta's wonderful smile to make a day. We have lost such wonderful characters. Brother Abdel Fattah Qasim, Brother Muhsin Al-Harbi, and Dr. Abdul Samad, and 48 more. But not forever, as we hope to meet them again in paradise and live in peace forever. No words can describe what my heart experienced at that time and still experiencing. It is only the remembrance of Allah that keeps me going. Since 15th of March 2019 and until now, my heart is yearning for restoration of justice to the victims of the heinous massacre and the call for the reinstatement of the death penalty for brutal conscienceless crimes. It is a fact that justice should be a balance, where the seriousness of the crime should be balanced by the consequences. I fear for the safety of all New Zealanders if the punishment for the brutal crimes is not in balance. To close, I pray to Allah to bless New Zealand and bless the New Zealand people.
In Belarus, last weekend, another immense crowd calling on the dictator Lukashenko to resign. His answer, of course, was no. Here he is going to his mansion by helicopter. And getting off, he's carrying an automatic rifle. Apparently, he's not too sure of his security detail. Now back to Democracy Now! For their coverage of the impressive and unprecedented sports strike to demand racial justice after the shooting of Jacob Blake by 7 bullets.
This is Democracy Now! I'm Amy Goodman. In a remarkable development Wednesday, professional basketball, baseball, soccer games came to an unprecedented halt after Milwaukee Bucks players refused to take to the court for a playoff game against the Orlando Magic in support of Black Lives Matter. The NBA then canceled all 3 of Wednesday's playoff games. Then, on TNT, former basketball star, the sports commentator Kenny Smith, walked off the set of Inside the NBA in solidarity with the protesters.
As a black man, as a former player, I think it's best for me to support the players and just not be here tonight. And figure out what happens after that. Yeah, I just don't feel equipped to do that.
And I respect that.
You then can't hear him much because he's taken off his microphone and he walks off the TV set. The women's WNBA also canceled 3 games Wednesday after members of the Washington Mystics arrived wearing T-shirts, each with 7 holes symbolizing the 7 bullet holes in the back of their T-shirts, with the fronts of the T-shirts spelling out the name Jacob Black. Each woman wearing Jacob Blake. Each woman wearing a T-shirt with one of the letters of Jacob Blake's name. This is Mystics guard Ariel Atkins.
This isn't just about basketball. We aren't just basketball players, and just because we are basketball players doesn't mean that's our only platform. We need to understand that when most of us go home, we still are black.
3 Major League Baseball games were postponed after players on the Milwaukee Brewers, Seattle Mariners, and other teams joined protests. Mets slugger Dominic Smith kneeled for the national anthem ahead of Wednesday night's game against the Florida Marlins and broke down in tears at a post-game press conference. Most of Wednesday's Major League Soccer games were postponed, and the Western and Southern Open tennis tournament suspended matches after tennis superstar Naomi Osaka, whose father is Haitian, withdrew to protest against racial injustice. For more, we're joined by Dave Zirin, sports editor for The Nation magazine, host of the Edge of Sports podcast. Welcome to Democracy Now! This is an amazing moment in this country's history, especially as, interestingly, yesterday, though Vice President Pence, it was talked about that he would condemn athletes for taking the knee. Forget taking the knee at this point. Athletes are not taking to the courts. They're not going out on the field. They are boycotting, Dave.
Yeah, it's great to be on with you and talk about what I think is best described as a sports strike wave for racial justice. It's more than a boycott. It's them withdrawing their labor and taking money out of the system and saying the games will not go on. It's not just an example for racial justice protesters around the country. I think it's a challenge to the labor movement as a whole to say, if this country is in fact non-functioning at the moment, and many of us believe this is not a functioning country, then labor has to assert itself in this battle and stand up. And that's exactly what the athletes are doing with this sports strike wave.
NBC is reporting a group of athletes led by LeBron James are rolling out a multi-million-dollar program in the next few weeks to recruit poll workers in heavily black electoral districts for November election. A person familiar with the plan says, and didn't LeBron walk out of the bubble with others and they're going to Washington to protest?
Yeah, LeBron is a big part of this story right now because yesterday all the NBA players had a meeting after the games were canceled inside this bubble, this hermetically sealed bubble down in Orlando, Florida. And the Los Angeles Lakers and the Los Angeles Clippers, and LeBron is on the Lakers, they broke with the rest of the players and said that we don't want the playoffs to continue. Now, this could be a negotiating tactic because they're meeting with the NBA bosses today, the franchise owners. They're called the franchise governors, and they're going to be speaking with them about what NBA owners can do to put their billions of dollars towards the cause of racial justice. And so there still might be NBA playoffs, but right now LeBron is leading a very radical break from the players as a whole to wrest more reforms out of the NBA.
So, Dave, as we wrap up right now, just the significance from the WNBA to the NBA to the much wider baseball teams, all being in solidarity. What do you think this means? And for President Trump, who's made it a point at almost every speech to condemn anyone who takes a knee.
For years, the world of sports has been a site of resistance to the racism of this administration, starting when Colin Kaepernick took that knee almost exactly 4 years ago to the date that the players made this decision. And this is just another chapter in that story about how the world of sports has been a site of resistance, an invaluable site of resistance against the depravities of this administration.
Thank you so much for being with us. The Milwaukee Bucks read a team statement explaining their decision to boycott their playoff game against the Orlando Magic. We're going to play just a short clip of Sterling Brown and point guard George Hill.
Despite the overwhelming plea for change, there has been no action. So our focus today cannot be on basketball.
When we take the court and represent Milwaukee and Wisconsin, we are expected to play at a high level, give maximum effort, and hold each other accountable. We hold ourselves to that standard, and in this moment, we are demanding the same from lawmakers and law enforcement. We are calling for justice for Jacob Blake and demand the officers be held accountable.
And Dave Zirin, your final comment.
Just a final comment is that Sterling Brown, who spoke there, has his own lawsuit against the Milwaukee Police Department from when he was tased in 2018. So the players are not bystanders to this process. The players are looking at this world and saying what John Carlos said in 1968 before the Olympics, which is, why should we run in Mexico City only to crawl home?
Dave Zirin, sports editor for The Nation magazine, host of Edge of Sports podcast.
Dave Zirin is right. This is a challenge to the American labor movement. Why aren't some of the thousands of labor union locals, some minority, taking action? In Burlington, in the far north of Vermont, some 1,500 people turned out to protest the shooting of Blake. The latest news about Blake is that he's paralyzed from the waist down. And Jacob Blake is being handcuffed to his hospital bed. Apparently he's under arrest. Who knows on what charge? And in Kenosha, 2 people were murdered, allegedly by a 17-year-old. His license to drive had been suspended. So how did he get from Wisconsin to Illinois with an illegal AK-47? And disgusting Tucker Carlson seemed to justify the murders on Fox News, saying, how shocked are we that 17-year-olds with rifles decided they had to maintain order when no one else would. Maintain order? Yes, that's what they mean by law and order. Random terror to protect the status quo. Upcoming is a protest, Justice for Mubarak, on Saturday, September 5th at 3 p.m. in Bridgeport, Connecticut, to call for the dismissal and arrest of the state trooper who killed Mubarak Salman in West Haven, Connecticut in January. In video from Unicorn Riot about a march in Minneapolis led by a young woman who wants to honor her father who was killed by police when she was an infant.
Hello everybody, welcome. This is Nico from Unicorn Riot. We're here walking with a group in front of the group as they march down to U.S. Bank Stadium.
Black lives are under attack. What do we do? What do we do? They don't get no peace.
In the left, her father. Her father died after a police interaction. You see the sign, demand the reopening of the case 1218-263 or 1-218. Oh, this is the number, phone number, excuse me. That's the phone number to call. 1218-263-3601. That's the number to demand that they reopen the case of Lionel Lewis. So here we go with the bikers leading the procession. You see the Walker Art Center, or Guthrie.
Shut it down! Shut it down! Inside! Send those killer cops to jail! Send those killer cops to jail! The whole damn system is guilty as hell! Unite, convict, send those killer cops to jail! The whole damn system is guilty as hell!
That's our program for today. Stay safe, folks, but stay active. This is Stanley Heller for The Struggle.